There are moments from the past that seem completely ordinary when they happen. A conversation. A look across a room. A name written somewhere. A photograph you barely remember taking. And then, somehow, years later, that same memory suddenly feels different. That may be what happened with the person you're thinking about. Recently, they came across something connected to you that they hadn't seen in a long time. Maybe it was an old photo. Maybe a message. Maybe a place that reminded them of a moment you both shared. At first, they probably didn't think much of it. But then something changed. They stopped. They remembered how they felt around you. And more importantly, they remembered something they had pushed aside. You weren't just another person who passed through their life. There was something about you that stayed. The strange part is that they may have never understood why. They could have moved forward, met new people, focused on work, school, family, or simply convinced themselves that the past was the past. But that old memory reopened a question they thought they had already answered. What if I misunderstood what this connection meant? And that's where everything started making sense. Because sometimes you don't recognize the importance of a person while you're standing inside the moment. You recognize it later. When enough distance gives you the ability to see what you couldn't see before. They may be realizing that certain feelings didn't disappear. They were simply buried beneath everything else. And now that memory has brought them back to the surface. But there's another reason this moment matters. Because the memory didn't just remind them of you. It reminded them of who they were when you were around. And that realization may be harder for them to ignore. That old memory didn't just bring your face back into their mind. It brought back a feeling. And sometimes, a feeling can tell you more than 1,000 explanations. They may have looked at that memory and suddenly remembered the little things they ignored back then. The way you listened. The way you looked at them when they weren't expecting it. A conversation that seemed insignificant at the time. But somehow stayed in their mind. And that's when they may have started connecting the dots. They realized that what they felt around you wasn't necessarily random. Maybe they had called it coincidence. Maybe they convinced themselves they were imagining the connection. Maybe circumstances simply weren't right. But looking back now, they can see the pattern differently. There were moments when they wanted to get closer. And moments when fear, timing, distance, or uncertainty made them pull away. The memory may have reminded them of one specific thing. You never really got a fair chance to see what this connection could become. That realization can hit unexpectedly. Because it's one thing to miss someone. It's another thing to wonder what might have happened if you had both been more honest. They may even be asking themselves questions they don't have easy answers for. Why did I walk away? Why didn't I say what I really felt? Why do I still remember this? And perhaps the biggest question. Do they remember me too? That's where the old memory becomes important. Because they aren't only remembering the past. They're comparing it with the present. They may have experienced other connections since then, but something about yours still feels unfinished. Not necessarily because they believe everything is magically destined. But because there was never a clear ending. There was no moment where both of you truly said what needed to be said. And unfinished stories have a strange way of returning to our thoughts. So now they could be quietly reconsidering you. Not dramatically. Not necessarily rushing toward you. Just wondering. Watching. Remembering. And maybe, for the first time, admitting to themselves that you meant more than they allowed themselves to believe. But there's one part of this realization they haven't fully faced yet. Because if that memory really changed the way they see the past, then they have to decide what they're going to do with that realization now. And that's where things become interesting. Because remembering you is one thing. But deciding whether to reach toward you again, that's something entirely different. The memory may have answered one question for them. But it created another. What do I do now? Because realizing that someone still matters is much easier than admitting it to that person. They may have thought about reaching out. Maybe they even opened your profile, typed something, and then stopped. Not because they don't care. Sometimes it's the opposite. When a connection carries emotional weight, even a simple message can feel like a huge decision. They may be wondering whether you've moved on. Whether you'd even want to hear from them. Whether you remember the same moment they can't stop thinking about. And there's something else they could be afraid of. What if you don't feel the same way anymore? That's the part people rarely talk about. Someone can miss you deeply and still remain completely silent because they don't know what your reaction will be. So instead of making a DR, maybe the most important part of this story isn't whether they come back. It's what that old memory helped them understand. For a long time, they may have treated what happened between you as something ordinary. Just a moment. Just timing. Just another chapter. But seeing that memory again forced them to look at the past without the excuses they once used. And suddenly, the little things mattered. The words they never said. The conversation they never finished. The opportunity they allowed to pass. They may finally understand that some people don't leave your life completely. Sometimes they simply become quieter. They move into the background of your memories, waiting for something to remind you why they mattered. And maybe that reminder was exactly what they needed. But here's what matters for you. Don't put your life on pause waiting for someone to figure themselves out.